The village of Udo sat quietly between two hills in the middle of southern Nigeria, about 40 kilometers from the nearest big town. It was not on any popular map, it did not have a postal address, but it was real, a living, breathing community of farmers, teachers, traders, and families who had lived on that land for over 200 years. Udo had a primary school with cracked walls and a proud flag. It had a small market that opened every Thursday. It had a church at one end and a shrine at the other, and somehow both existed without fighting each other. The people of Udo believed in balance. They believed that the land gave and the people must give back. That was the old way. But things had changed. It began on a Tuesday morning in the dry season when a black SUV with tinted windows rolled into Udo and parked in the center of the village square. Out stepped a man in a crisp white agbada with a gold watch that caught the sun and threw light into people's eyes like a warning they did not read. His name was Mr. Dara. He said he was a developer. He said he had come to bring opportunity. "Good people of Udo," he announced, standing on the flatbed of a pickup truck so everyone could see him. "I have come to bring progress. Roads, electricity, clean water, schools for your children, a hospital for your elderly. All I ask is the right to build on the forest behind your eastern hill." The villagers murmured among themselves, "The eastern forest." Everyone in Udo knew the eastern forest. Parents told their children not to play there after sunset. Hunters avoided it even in bright daylight. It was not because of superstition alone. It was because the eastern forest was where the oldest trees grew, where 3 rivers were born, where the soil was so deep and dark it looked like the earth itself was breathing. The elders called it Oja Udo, the Keeper of Udo. Chief Boma, a village head, was a broad-shouldered man of 60 with grey eyes and grey at his temples. He listened to Mr. Dara carefully. Then he shook his head. "We thank you for your offer," Chief Boma said, "but the eastern forest is not ours to sell. It belongs to the land itself. Our fathers left it standing so that we could stand. We will not touch it." Mr. Dara smiled. It was the kind of smile that did not reach his eyes. "Of course," he said. "Of course, I understand completely." He got back into his SUV and drove away. But he did not go far. Mr. Dara was clever. He did not come back to the chief. Instead, he came back to the people. He sent mobile phones to the young men. He sent bags of rice and cartons of juice to families with many children. He paid for 3 boys from Udo to attend university in the city on one condition, that their families would sign a letter of community support for his project. The families did not read the letter carefully. They were grateful. They signed. One by one, quietly, like termites eating a wooden beam from the inside, Mr. Dara gathered signatures. He gathered whispers. He gathered the quiet yes of people who were tired of being poor, tired of fetching water from the river, tired of watching their children squint at textbooks under bad lighting. He did not lie exactly. He just never told the full truth. The full truth was this: the eastern forest was sitting on top of one of the largest deposits of crude oil ever quietly surveyed in that region. Once the trees were cleared, the drilling would begin, and the drilling, as it always did, would poison the rivers that fed Udo's farms. It would crack the foundations of their homes. It would make the air thick and the water black. Udo would not become wealthy. Udo would become useful. Then Udo would become empty. There was one person in Udo who was not fooled. Her name was Mama Sade.
She was not an elder. She was not a chief or a priestess. She was a 42-year-old biology teacher at the village primary school, who wore reading glasses and kept a small notebook in her dress pocket at all times. Mama Sade had grown up in Udo. She had left for university in Lagos, studied environmental science, and come back home because she loved the village too much to abandon it. She had seen what oil drilling did to communities in the Niger Delta. She had read the reports. She had seen the photographs. She knew exactly what Mr. Dara's plan would do to Udo. She called a meeting. Only 12 people came. "They are going to destroy our forest," she told them. "And when the forest dies, the rivers will dry. When the rivers dry, the farms will fail. When the farms fail, we will have nothing, not even the clean air we breathe right now." An old man named Papa Chike scratched his chin. "But Sade," he said, "there will be jobs, hospital, roads." "Papa Chike," she said gently. Who builds a hospital for people he plans to displace? Those promises are written on water. I have seen it happen before. But people were tired of being patient. They were tired of waiting for a government that never came. Mr. Dara's gifts were real and physical. Mama Sade's warnings were invisible, things that had not happened yet. And so, they chose what they could see. Chief Boma was the last wall standing. As long as he refused, the project could not legally proceed. So, Mr. Dara found a way to move the wall. On a Wednesday night, Chief Boma's youngest daughter, Adaze, was rushed to the hospital in the city. She had fallen suddenly ill, a fever so high it frightened everyone. The hospital bills came quickly and climbed higher. By morning, Mr. Dara was at the hospital. He sat beside Chief Boma in the waiting room. He said nothing about business. He paid the bills without being asked. He held the old man's hand and prayed with him. 3 days later, Adaze recovered. And 3 days after that, Chief Boma signed the document. Nobody in Udo could blame him. What father could say no after that? What man could choose a forest over his own child? But Mama Sade sat in her classroom that evening, staring at the blackboard, and felt the cold shadow of something she could not name. It has begun, she whispered to no one. The machines arrived on a Monday. They were enormous, yellow excavators and bulldozers that roared like monsters. They came in a convoy that stretched half a kilometer long. The children ran out to watch. Even the adults came to the edge of the village square to stare. The machines entered the eastern forest. And then the sounds began. First, the cracking of ancient trees. Each one fell like a slow giant going to its knees. Birds burst out of the canopy in screaming clouds. Animals scattered. The ground trembled with each impact. Some of the older women began to cry without knowing why. Mama Sade stood at the edge of the forest and pressed her hand against the bark of the last standing tree at the boundary. An old Iroko tree, wide as a car, older than anyone alive in Udo. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I'm sorry we failed you." That night, something strange happened. The air changed. It is difficult to explain. People who were there say the air became very still, unnaturally still, as though the world had taken a deep breath and was holding it. The insects went silent. The dogs refused to eat. Children cried without cause and couldn't explain why. And in the eastern sky, above where the forest had stood, there was a light. Not lightning, not a fire. A soft, pulsing glow, amber and deep red, like an ember that could not decide whether to die or grow. By dawn, the glow was gone. But there was something else. Every single well in Udo had gone dry overnight. Every one. Not slowly, completely, as though the water had simply decided to leave. The river that fed the village farms had not dried, but its color had changed. Slightly brown, slightly wrong, and the fish that normally jumped and sparkled in it were floating quietly at the surface, dead. Mama Sade ran from well to well, then to the river. She pulled out her notebook. She was writing fast, hands trembling, not from cold. "It's starting," she said to anyone who would listen. "This is just the beginning. The underground water system has been disturbed. The vibrations from the machinery have cracked the natural water table. This is textbook. This is exactly what I warned." "Sade, enough," one of the young men shouted. "Stop trying to scare people. This is a coincidence. 400 people lost their water source overnight and you're calling it a coincidence," she shot back. The argument went on. But while they argued, Mama Sade did something nobody expected. She packed a bag. She loaded her notebooks, her students' records, and the village's oldest document, a handwritten history of Udo, passed down through chiefs, written in careful Yoruba and English, into a single worn leather bag. She gave it to her sister who lived in the next town. "Keep this safe," she said. "Whatever happens, keep this safe." Her sister looked at her strangely. "Sade, what do you think is going to happen?" Mama Sade looked back at Udo. at its rooftops, its market stalls, its school building, its familiar smoke rising from morning cooking fires. "I don't know exactly," she said quietly, "but something is going to happen that changes this place forever, and someone has to remember that Udo existed." That night, a Thursday night, the drilling began. It was not supposed to start so soon, but Mr. Dara was in a hurry. His investors were waiting, his timelines were tight. The drills went deep, and at 11:47 p.m., they hit something they were not supposed to hit. Nobody knows exactly what happened next because there were very few witnesses, but what investigators found 3 days later told a terrible story. The drilling had breached an underground gas pocket, a massive natural reservoir of compressed gas that had sat beneath Udo's ground for thousands of years, sealed safely by layers of rock and clay. The breach caused the ground to shift. Not an earthquake, not exactly, more like the earth shrugging, a slow rolling collapse of the underground structure that made the soil above it sink in certain places and crack in others. By midnight, the drilling camp was on fire. Mr. Dara's men ran. And then, and this is the part that haunts everyone who has ever heard this story, the shifting ground severed the gas line running beneath the village. Not the drilling company's gas line, the old, poorly maintained government pipeline that had run beneath Udo for 30 years, forgotten and unchecked. The gas leak was invisible, silent, odorless at first. By 1 a.m., Udo was filling with gas. By 2 a.m., an electric generator someone left running sparked. The explosion was heard 40 kilometers away. When rescue teams arrived 3 days later, delayed like bad roads, by miscommunication, by the bureaucratic fog that always seems to thicken in moments of emergency, they found something that shook them to their bones. Udo was there. The buildings were standing, mostly. The school flag was still up, tattered and singed. The market stalls were in place. The cooking pots were still warm from the night before. The fires in the hearths had burned down to embers. But there were no people. Not dead bodies, not survivors stumbling in the bush, not footprints leading anywhere. The 437 residents of Udo were simply gone. Some were found weeks later in hospitals in distant towns, treated for gas exposure, confused about how they had gotten there, remembering nothing but a terrible smell and then darkness. Some were found in the forest, the survivors who had run instinctively into the bush when the ground shook, guided by something older than reason. Mama Sade was one of them. She had woken at midnight with a headache she recognized. She had lived in Lagos long enough to know what gas exposure felt like in its early stages. She went door to door, banging, shouting, pulling people from their beds. She saved 61 lives that night.
The rest were scattered, some displaced, some lost, some found. Miraculously, deaths were fewer than anyone expected. But Udo itself, the village, as a living community, as a home, was gone. Mr. Dara was arrested. His company was investigated. There were court cases. There were reports. There were promises of compensation. The land was declared unsafe for habitation. Udo was officially closed. A journalist found Mama Sade 3 months later, living in a rented room in a nearby town, still teaching, now at a school there, still carrying her one leather bag. "What do you want people to know about Udo?" the journalist asked. Mama Sade was quiet for a long moment. She looked out the window. "I want them to know that Udo did not disappear because of magic," she said slowly. "It disappeared because of choices. Small choices made by many people over a short time. The choice to stay silent. The choice to take a gift without asking what it costs. The choice to believe that progress means destroying what keeps you alive." She paused. "And I want them to know that the earth is patient. It absorbs what we give it, our dirt, our noise, our greed, our carelessness for a very long time. But it has limits. And when it reaches those limits, it doesn't argue with us. It doesn't warn us again. It simply responds."
She opened her leather bag and held up the old hand-written history of Udo. "As long as this exists," she said softly, "Udo exists. You can destroy a place, but you cannot destroy a memory if someone decides to carry it." If you were a villager that night Mama Sade came knocking on your door at midnight, warning you to run, would you have believed her and followed her into the dark? Or would you have told her she was overreacting and gone back to sleep? Tell us honestly in the comments. Your answer might surprise you. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Not because it is just a story, but because Udo is real. Different names, different places, same choices being made right now somewhere in the world. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, because we will keep telling the stories that matter, the ones with truth buried inside them, waiting to be found. And remember the words of Mama Sade, you can destroy a place, but you cannot destroy a memory if someone decides to carry it. Thanks for watching.